So this is the bottom washer, shim, that goes between the shoe and the bottom of the rudder, and it's a gap filler. It's not a bearing. It's supposed to be freely moving within that space. It's the rudder has been sitting on this, and it is worn into it. It's not particularly worn into it. It's quite a hard material that's quite a decent lubricated surface for the rudder, especially in the water. And the reason it's been sitting on that is because it would appear that this bearing or deck is too low. So somebody at some point has added a shim to the system, which goes onto the big sort of locking nut that goes down. However, it's not actually enough, and this was bottoming out on the top of the stock where it widens up for its own bearing surfaces, and technically it wasn't actually sitting on the thrust bearing at all. It was sitting on this washer, meaning that the thrust bearing wasn't actually holding the weight of the rudder at all. Whether that there is just enough play within the bearing setup, the actual needle bearings, that you were seeing that ever so slight tiny wobble, because it was incredibly tiny. This probably results in the fact that this had no supporting weight on it at all. It was freely sitting in its housing.
And then the design of this rudder system is that the bulk of the weight, actually majority of the weight, sits on that thrust bearing.
On that thrust bearing, yeah. The rudder should be suspended between the bottom of the hull and the top of the shoe, and these two spaces fill the gap, but should be freely spinning. They shouldn't, maybe a bit of paint or whatever, but it's not a bearing per se. It's just a gap filler for spacing. And what we're going to do is we're going to use one of the
old
pieces of the old bearing,
the bearing race,
because it is the right size, and it's hard stainless, and it's just sitting on top of the bearing that is in there, and that's giving another 7mm on top of the 7mm here, so it's 14mm in total that we're lifting up, so that this nut can actually do what it's supposed to do, which is tighten down onto the top of the thrust bearing, thereby allowing your rudder to be suspended as opposed to sitting on the washer. So somewhere, somehow, I sort of had a look at the drawings, and I'm of the opinion it's around 12mm of difference here, that's not quite accounted for, and that's what that 14mm that we're adding takes up. So yeah, so we've had to re-drill this, because this wouldn't line up with the holes that are there in the bearing housing, and the grub screw was never tightened up, and I suppose it was never tightened up because you couldn't get to it. I mean, you just couldn't get to it. You couldn't see it through there. I don't know if there's a mark on there still, but this is quite near the top of the hole that is supposed to be the access for this grub screw.
And there are 4 holes on the side of the. There's one there, and there's one there.
They're big holes. They're 25mm holes to get to the grub screw, because it's supposed to be, that's the tolerance to get to the grub screw, and you couldn't do it. This is quite near the top now, so
okay. So then the plan of attack is to take the spacer that is not in any of the drawings.
No.
Combine that with the old bearing race, which had no wear on it whatsoever, to build up enough height so that thrust collar will engage the thrust bearing and support the weight of the rudder.
Yeah, that was added in build, I suppose, and didn't. It was just off. It was just off. I think it needed to be at least 9mm probably, and that would have meant your thread was the very limit of bottoming out. It was so close. So by adding the 7mm ring, which we just handily have, we're guaranteeing that we can bottom out.
So based upon your estimate now, how much of those threads will engage on the rudder stock?
Oh, all of them will engage.
So that gives us
Yeah,
a lot of support.
we wanted to lift up because the thread goes right the way down to the bottom, and there is actually a bit of a gap between the sort of chamfer at the top of the stock and the bottom of the threads. There's a sort of a 4 or 5 mil gap that's going. So by lifting it up, if I wasn't using the 7 mil packer, I was going to go for a 3 mil stainless packer anyway to lift it up enough so it's 100% engaged.
Okay. So with the addition of using the spacer that was made clearly at the factory, I don't know what else they would have made it. But that means that it left the factory without ever having engaged that grub screw.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how it could have ever been done up. I couldn't find it when we were taking it apart, and I was mystified. I just assumed it wasn't even there. So I don't know. Somebody at some time has beaten out this bronze retainer which holds the thrust bearing in, because there's a lot of marking, including actual sort of round punch markings where it was punched back into place. So it's I'm assuming it's because it was taken out at some point, and partly because also where the O-ring, the housing for the O-ring was quite damaged. It's definitely been smacked about.
But that's not going to impact any of us going back together. It was a little bit tough getting out, but
No.
you were able to smooth it out
No.
and went back in smoothly then, right?
I mean, physically on the drawings, the top of this stock is supposed to be, I think, 15 millimeters below the deck height here, and it's pretty much just level. It's almost bang on there. So I'm a couple of mil there.
So once we have it,
So that's where I sort of instantly get a half-inch difference here.
okay. So once we have it all back together, we're going to have to dry fit test that cover to make sure it does clear.
Yes, it should clear. It's got quite a big
Really?
spacing in the back. It's
Really?
8 mil you measured it to, and I think we looked at this as something like 3 mil here. So we are clear.
Okay.
We are clear.
Okay. And that won't have any impact on us ever having to use emergency tiller because that height doesn't really matter.
No. I mean, if anything, it's easier to use your emergency
It's
tiller.
a
Really,
little
you've
bit
got
higher
12
up.
mil extra.
Okay. Okay. So the final result is it'll go back together and it'll be correctly supported from the top versus the bottom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'm gonna pull everything up and pull the stock up. It's wedged up at the bottom. We're gonna get some load on this, so we pull it up hard. I'm gonna wind it down and just back it off a fraction. Because it's quite a good spacing, the rudder within the bottom of the hull and the top of the shoe. There's only really a kind of 1.5 millimeters of play. So I'm gonna hope this just drops down 0.5 mil or so, and then it's sitting on the bearing, and that's where we'll tighten it and leave it.
okay.
So
All right.
I'll be working on the bearing eventually.
And then we should be good to go. And that may be when I was in the lazarette after having to replace the mama drive. I noticed that there was some wiggle at the top, inside the lazarette up here, some wiggle down here. But if there's no load on that bearing, then it's sort of free to move as the autopod's moving things back and forth.
Yeah, I don't know how tight the needle bearing is, whether there's just a little fraction of play, but when everything's all loaded up, it's more of a guide, to within that, but by not having any weight on that thrust bearing to hold it down, you're right. It was basically just free to move around if it could move around.
The other thing that you noticed is that when you took things apart, there was no damage or wear on any of the plastic needle bearings or the actual bearing itself.
No.
Which means it wasn't doing any work.
No, the thrust bearing doesn't have there's not even a line. It's not even a clean line where
From where
maybe
the roller
it's been
balls
running
were.
or something.
Yeah,
I suspect
okay.
it was never actually doing anything. It's just sat there.
And we don't know if this has ever been serviced or anything. It's boat's 24 years old.
Yeah, no way of knowing.
So no way of knowing.
Other than somebody else would have encountered this before and before.
And they
That's odd.
may put it back together the way that they took it apart without actually doing the investigation you did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I took it apart and there was an extra ring, and I was a little confused because it's definitely not there in the drawing. So I kept it in the order so I could see what it was, and then realised it was a shim that was added.
Well, that also implies that, or it indicates that having been able to get the drawings from Oyster actually was to our benefit. So because then we knew what we were looking for. We knew what the drawings said.
Yeah.
The drawings don't show that steel ring. So
No. And I've checked the measurements on here. I've had a look, and this is all as it should be from the drawing. And it's hard to tell if this is correct, the actual machining of this piece. But perhaps there wasn't some sort of issue in the machining, but I highly suspect there wasn't, and that it's just the depth is too low.
Or I mean,
my best assumption.
At this point, you don't know what to make of it. So
Yeah.
okay. Anything? Any other observations?
No. All good.
Okay.
It's going to go back right, so
Yep. There we go.
what it's going